Istanbul is hosting the first international Young Poets meeting until the 18th. Joining us now is UK poet and music producer Rena Minegishi and event organizer Cenk Gultekin. Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
How's your experience been at the event so far?
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful and incomparable experience meeting poets from all over the world, especially in a city like Turkey. I've not experienced much Turkish literature prior to this experience, but I'm really inspired to do that now. The caliber of poets are very high, and the invitation to us has been really welcoming.
So what are some of the standout events taking place this weekend, and can anybody join?
Yeah, of course. All the events are public events, so anyone interested in these events can join. And we've designed the events in a way that, there are readings, there are panel discussions that are not really academic, so it's more accessible to youngsters and the overall public who's interested in poetry. And we have certain delegations coming from Balkan countries and from Arab-speaking countries, so we have panels on those. And one of the event modules is countries and their poets, so they get to introduce themselves and describe to the Turkish audience what the poetry scene is like in their respective countries.
Do you feel it's important that poets from all over the world are coming together and asking questions and maybe trying to find some answers to them as well about what it means to be human in the modern world that we live in right now?
Exactly. I mean, there are several events in Istanbul that provide platforms for poets and writers, but this is the first event that directly engages with the young writers, both in Turkey and globally. And we believe there's a certain industry bias towards young writers. They're not really well represented in the publishing industry and the events. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring together all these writers and young minds and to allow them to discuss not just poetry, but their cultures and their certain imagined realities or biases towards certain topics. So it's a great opportunity for them to sort of reinvent their viewpoints or certain judgments.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, even though we come from such different countries, and many of these countries I've never visited before. I've never been to Hungary, I've never been to Iraq, where Mona is from, I think. Yeah. However, we always end up finding commonalities to discuss. We, as poets, always grapple with the question of expressing our thoughts, expressing for or against cultural norms that are represented in our countries. And it is incredible, really, how much commonality we have. And at the same time, everyone has different experiences. So, I was asking quite personal advice as a poet yesterday to a room full of poets I've never met before, and they all had something different to tell me. I think experiences like that are indispensable for a young artist.
Do you think Istanbul is a bit of an ideal place to have this kind of meeting?
Well, definitely. Istanbul has been a cultural focal point for a lot of, especially with poetry, it has a really big significance because Istanbul has been a great source of inspiration for a lot of writers and poets throughout the centuries. Another interesting aspect is the state patronage has been there during Ottoman times, and it has continued up until this time. And we believe this is and it hosts a lot of people from different classes, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, and it has a very cosmopolitan makeup, which is felt in the events we sort of design and organize as well.
I hear you're also studying music, Rena. Does it help you do both disciplines inspire each other, do you find?
I get that question a lot, and I always disappoint them by saying no.
No.
However, I do think poetry is very musical. I think if you say spoken word or slam poetry, people immediately understand the musicality of the pace at which you deliver, the intonation. But even in page poetry, I've always thought rhythm and tone was indispensable in writing it. But however, the reason why I personally, because many artists have successfully done it, I just can't do it myself. The reason why I personally don't merge the two creative processes together is, for me personally, music says everything poetry fails to say, and vice versa. So I switch between the two.
Well, it sounds like a great event. Is it just going to be this year, or are there any plans to make this into a yearly event?
Basically, we hope that it becomes a permanent feature of the literary landscape in Turkey, because of the reasons I mentioned a bit earlier. Because like Turkish young writers don't get a lot of representation in the industry, and they have a lot of things to add to the industry, fresh perspectives, and there are a lot of very talented emerging artists. And I think this could be the platform for us to discover those emerging talents and bring them more exposure. So yeah, I hope that it will become a sort of like sustainable, permanent event.
Okay. Well, Cenk and Rena, thank you very much for joining us on Showcase.
Thank you.
Thank you.